the one who seeks. And if he doesn't stop searching, he always finds something new that he's looking for. And when he finds it, he will be troubled. And when he is troubled, he will be amazed with wonder. And he will reign over everything, over all that rules. The name of Jesus Christ is known in every corner of the world. We are scientists in many different ways, because he was a great teacher, prophet, the Son of God. His words have shaped history. His message has transformed civilizations, and his life has become the origin of a major world religion. Despite that, he has been described as history's most influential figure. His life is filled with gaps, contradictions, and missing pieces. Even in the Bible itself, there isn't much information about his life. It's as if we weren't supposed to know that side of him. His true side, the warm side, the bright side. How is it possible to know so little about a man who remains so famous almost 2,000 years after his death? And what's even more interesting, does the Bible really tell the true story of Jesus? That image of Jesus which is not preserved in religious temples, and that image filled with information which is imprinted in each one of us. Isn't it a little different? What has he truly left for us? Has he been understood? With what he has done, has his message been understood? And where was he during his missing years, so that he could do what he later became known for? Subscribe to our channel. This is still very much in the minds of eternity. Thank you for being here. A very special episode for a very special person. Number 3. And we start with the fact that we call him Jesus of Nazareth, but his real name in his own language, Aramaic, is Yeshua. This name comes from Hebrew, Yehoshua, which means God saves. Over time, the name was shortened to Yeshua, which was very common in his time. When the Bible was later translated into Greek and Latin, the name changed, and eventually in English it became Jesus. Interestingly, the same Hebrew name, Yehoshua, is also translated differently in the Old Testament, where in English it becomes Joshua. So Jesus as Yeshua or Joshua both come from the same original name. Most of us have heard the same story about Joshua countless times. Born in a manger, surrounded by animals, with a shining star in the sky and wise men bringing gifts. This is a scene that has been repeated many times in Christmas plays, in paintings, in churches for more than 2,000 years. But what if the story of his birth hides secrets that have been overlooked for centuries? What if the events surrounding his birth are not just religious symbols, but clues to something much bigger, something different? According to the story, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a stable, while his parents were looking for shelter. At least that's what the Bible tells us. The Gospel of Luke describes how Jesus' parents, Maria and Joseph, traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem because of a Roman census ordered by Caesar Augustus. And in those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be registered. This was the first registration while Quirinius was governing Syria, and everyone went to be registered, each to his own city. So Joseph went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, who was betrothed to him and was pregnant. While they were there, her time to give birth arrived. She gave birth to her first son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, since there was no room at the inn. Since Joseph is from the house of King David, he must to register in Bethlehem, the city of his ancestors. Pretty straightforward so far, right? Things get strange. Not a single Roman record mentions a census requiring people to return to the cities of their ancestors. Instead, tax censuses require people to register where they live, not where their ancestors came from. This is very unusual since Rome was known for keeping detailed records. If an empire-wide census really forced millions of people to move over vast distances, wouldn't there be some evidence of that? Didn't Roman historians write about the chaos of so many people traveling all at once? Imagine, nowhere is this described. The historians searched, and they haven't found anything. Some people wonder whether Jesus was really born in Bethlehem or if the story was added later to match the old prophecies. One prophecy comes from Micah 5:2, written centuries before the birth of Jesus. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be a ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. In other words, the Jewish people expected the Messiah to be born in Bethlehem. Some believe that he was actually born in Nazareth, where he grew up, while others think that Bethlehem might have been a larger region, not just a single city. It doesn't matter where he was born. Bethlehem is important in Jewish prophecies, so his birth has to be connected to it in some way. Okay. Another fascinating element in the story of the birth is the Star of Bethlehem itself. The bright star that appears in the sky on the night when Jesus is born. The Gospel of Matthew describes it like this. And when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem and said, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. This suggests that these Magi, written as Magi or wise men, followed some celestial event that indicated the birth of a leader. But what exactly is this star? Historians and astronomers have studied several theories. Some believe that it was a rare event in the sky, such as when Jupiter and Saturn aligned in the 7th century before Christ and created a bright light. Others believe that it was a supernova, an exploding star that would have shone for a long time. But some old stories say that the star moved in a certain direction, guiding the Magi straight to Jesus. Joseph. This makes some researchers really wonder whether this was a natural event or something more specific, maybe a ship. Which is it? Ducaro? The child? Or the portal? It's possible, we don't know for sure, and everyone can make their own judgment based on the information they've reached. But what we do know is that this star definitely wasn't a normal event. It appeared for a specific reason at a very particular time and led a very specific group of people to Joshua. When it comes to this specific group, most of us imagine 3 wise men arriving with gifts. But the Bible never says there were 3 of them. It only calls them magi and never mentions their names or how many there were. So, you might ask who these mysterious visitors are, just to start somewhere. The term magi comes from Persian, more precisely from the Persian word for priests. They were experts in astronomy, astrology, alchemy, and sacred texts. Many scholars believe that they were Zoroastrians. These are followers of one of the world's earliest religions, considered the first and oldest, Zoroastrianism. In Zoroastrianism, there is a belief that a savior will come who will bring light to the world. And some even believe that the Magi were guided by an ancient Persian prophecy about a divine leader who would appear in Judea. Their gifts for Jesus are also meaningful. We have gold, which is a gift for kings, symbolizing royal authority. The frankincense, rather sacred frankincense, which is used in religious ceremonies, represents his divine nature. The myrrh, oil used in burial rituals, subtly hints at his future suffering and death. The fact that the wise men brought it suggests that they might have already known what awaited him. Whether they were following a prophecy that has been lost over time or had knowledge we cannot explain, one thing is certain. They believed that Joshua was special. They saw him as a king and someone whose life would change the world. And they were right? Naturally, magic's presence doesn't go unnoticed. When they arrive in Jerusalem, asking where the king of the Jews was born, they attract the attention of King Herod the Great. And according to Matthew 2 verses 3 and 4, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, he was furious and ordered all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under to be killed. Naturally, Herod, who is known for his brutality and paranoia, saw the idea of a newborn king as a threat to his entire rule. He pretends to convince everyone that he wants to find him so he can worship the newborn Messiah, but in reality he wants to make sure that he is killed. Accordingly, the wise men secretly leave Judea, and Herod, angry that he has been deceived by them, orders the infamous mass execution of all male children. This event is known as the Massacre of the Innocents, and it is described in Matthew 2:16. But historical records outside the Bible do not mention this at all. Some historians believe that this happened, but the records have been lost. Others believe that the story was written to create a parallel with Moses, whose life was spared as a baby when Pharaoh ordered the Hebrew babies to be killed. You can see this there's a very good movie, Exodus, Gods and Kings. Christian Bell stars. Can you hear? In Matthew 2:13, Joseph wakes up Maria to tell her something important. An angel of Yahweh had just appeared to him, and in a dream told him, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod intends to seek the child to kill him." Sorry to interrupt your interesting program, but I am very excited to share with you what we have been preparing for almost a year, our updated website enra.bg, and especially our individual space, which is for INRA members. It includes monthly webinars with us on extremely interesting topics about life and our existence, discussions, answers to questions, and participation with you personally. A closed Telegram group where we communicate daily and share with you what we are going through during that specific period. Additional PDF books and materials that have helped me tremendously to become the person I am today and continue to help me every day so I can keep developing. Audio meditations, both guided and just music with the exceptional voice of Navalia. Video meditations, something new, meditations and just music, meditations for healing, meditations for channeling, for connecting, videos and video materials that are exclusive, which you won't find on the YouTube channel, and also selected videos from YouTube that don't have ads. Thanks for everything. Visit inra.bg.f and take a look. We've included everything we have available at the moment. Also, let me say, the personal meetings with me, with everyone we meet with every week now, are available at inra.bg.s. You can go there and these are exactly the same, just the link is now adapted to our website and you can sign up from there. Thank you to each one of you for your time, your energy, and for choosing to continue to support and follow everything we do. This path is endless and you are endless as well. Thank you for sharing a small part of infinity together with us. Whatever the truth about Jesus' family, they fled to Egypt to escape the king's wrath. However, Egypt is not just a safe place for them, it is a land full of secrets. We know that Egyptian priests and sages were famous for their deep and mysterious knowledge, which influenced many great thinkers. Jesus' time in Egypt actually exposed him to that same ancient wisdom, which certainly influenced his later teachings about life and faith. Although the Bible doesn't say much about that time, one thing is certain. The young Joshua returns to Nazareth, where he continues to grow, but only after King Herod dies. This tells us two things. First, Jesus really did live in Egypt for a while. Second, Jesus lived in a land, imagine it, full of ancient temples, wisdom, spirituality, history. He was immersed in these Egyptian stories, saw and was in the temples, and probably even learned from their teachings and teachers. And this early exposure to Egyptian ideas influenced his way of thinking and the messages he later shared with the world. But what exactly was Jesus taught in Egypt and how does it connect to what he later taught? Well, Egypt has been a place where Jews have sought safety for a long time. Cities like Alexandria have large Jewish communities and many religious texts were translated there. But Egypt is also home to a legacy of gods and kings, spiritual traditions, religion, philosophy, a way of thinking. It was very different from what we would later see in Judea. What's even stranger is, what? Stories similar to that of Jesus exist in Egyptian mythology long before he was born, and it's important to acknowledge that, yes, that's correct. In Egyptian myths, Horus, the well-known son of Osiris and Isis, is a divine child, just as it is said that Jesus is the son of God and Mary. As a baby, Horus was hidden to protect him from danger, similar to how Jesus was taken to Egypt to escape from the king and his family. Horus also fought against Set, the god of chaos and evil, just as Jesus resisted Satan in the desert. Both are called the light of the world. Both are regarded as saviors who promise eternal life. Some believe that early Christians borrowed elements from Horus's story when telling the life of Jesus. Others believe that Jesus, after being exposed to Egyptian beliefs, may have understood his mission in a way that reflects the spiritual ideas already present there. But wait, there's more. Another fascinating connection between Egypt and Jesus comes from a pharaoh named Akhenaten, and that's something very interesting. He ruled Egypt more than 1,300 years before Jesus. Unlike other pharaohs, he had a very different appearance. He looks like an alien. His statues show an elongated, narrow face, a thin body, and a very unusual shape compared to other pharaohs, which makes many people wonder whether he had some specific medical condition or if his images were made that way on purpose. Or is this a trace of the gods, as Erich von Däniken describes it? What makes him so interesting, however, is that he believes in something that no other Egyptian ruler has ever believed in a single god. Before Akhenaten, as we know, the Egyptians worshipped many gods. Each had their own temple and followers, but Akhenaten changed things. He said there is only one true god, the sun god, and Akhenaten closed all the other temples. Click! He wanted people to pray only to Aten and abandon the old gods. This was shocking at the time, and naturally many priests and leaders were angry. After Akhenaten dies, they erase his name from history and bring back the old gods as if his ideas never ever existed. That's an interesting question. Clearly they weren't completely erased, since we still encounter them today. And some believe that Akhenaten's belief in one god influenced later religions, including Judaism and Christianity. Jesus preached about one god. Not about a distant ruler, but about a loving one, someone who cares for everyone. The way Enoton sees God and the way Jesus describes him are surprisingly similar. And of course, it's no coincidence that Jesus ended up in Egypt as a child. Maybe it was meant to happen exactly this way, to go to the same land where a long time ago another ruler tried to teach people about a single source. Unlike Akhenaten, whose ideas were erased, Jesus' message grew to spread and change the world forever. It's worth mentioning here that there are claims that Jesus spent part of his lost years in our lands. Yes, that's right. We'll just mention it. He studied and trained. Okuper perikon. Yes. According to many people, Hermeticism also influenced Jesus. It's a set of teachings associated with the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus. And for those of you who don't know, it was believed to be a blend of Egyptian and Greek wisdom. His teachings are entirely connected with the universe and our place in it. Hermes taught Mercury. One of the most famous ideas of Hermeticism is the following: the all is mind, the world is mental, everything is thought, as above so below, as within so without. This naturally means that everything is connected, that the big things in the universe and the small things in our lives reflect each other, that what happens in the world around us is connected to what happens inside us and our radiations and desires. Well, this idea doesn't sound very strange, and even sounds like something Jesus later teaches. In the Gospel of Thomas, a book with some of the lesser-known words of Jesus, he says the kingdom is within you and it is outside you. When you know yourself, then you will become known and you will understand that you are the sons of the living Father. Just like Hermeticism, the words of Jesus suggest that true change does not come from external forces or circumstances, but from within, through understanding ourselves and our connection to everything that is. Egyptian traditions also focus on these ideas. Thus, they teach that people can attain wisdom and a deeper connection with themselves as God-men, man-gods, by looking within themselves. Strangely, this is actually the foundation of Jesus' message. He encourages people to seek the truth within themselves, not just through religious rules. What's more mysterious is that there's an even greater emptiness in Joshua's life. For almost 18 years from the age of 12 to 30, the Bible says nothing about where he was. What was he doing? Or how did he prepare for his mission that would change the world? Why? What did he do that can't be mentioned and must remain out of history? Did he break some written law? There's a story about him in the Bible when he was 12. He was found in the temple, and he amazed his teachers with his wisdom. Luke 2:46-47 says the following: And after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers of the law, listening to them and asking them questions, and all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. After that, nothing. Nothing. He shows up at 30. He is called Jordan, baptized by Johann, and ready to teach, heal, and gather followers. Where has he been all this time? When the Bible starts talking about Joshua again, he already possesses his extraordinary abilities. He can already do it. That means, logically, something should have shaped him during those missing years, something that prepared him for his mission and turned him into the figure who would change history. And while some believe that he stayed in Nazareth, working as a carpenter and living an ordinary life, others think that he traveled, seeking wisdom and learning from different spiritual traditions. Since his family had already been to Egypt once, is it possible that he returned there to study its profound mysteries? Traditionally, Jesus is depicted as a man who raises people from the dead with powers that are either inherent to him or given by God. However, in many ancient spiritual traditions, such as the Egyptian one for example, the ability to bring the dead back to life is not considered a divine miracle. On the contrary, instead, it is believed that those who are spiritually advanced teachers can develop and master such abilities through deep knowledge and, of course, training. We remember the old stories and words. Jesus first learned to resurrect a bird, then a tiger, and finally a human, meaning he trained. This suggests that resurrection is not an instant miracle, but a skill that requires training and experience. If Jesus returned to Egypt at some point, he might have been exposed again to Hermetic and Egyptian mystical teachings. Even in the Bible, we see a pattern of gradual mastery. Jesus first performs smaller miracles, like healing the sick, and then raises the dead, like Lazarus. And finally, he conquers death itself through his own resurrection. This progression suggests that Jesus practiced, learned, and perfected his abilities over time. It didn't happen instantly. Furthermore, at that time, Egypt was home to a group of spiritual seekers called the Gnostics. They believed that true wisdom and connection with God do not come from following strict religious rules, but from looking within oneself and discovering and knowing the divine within us. Even more interesting is that some of their teachings sound very much like what Jesus would later preach. And how do we know this? Well, a mysterious book, the Gospel of Thomas, was discovered in 1945 in Egypt, again near a place called Nag Hammadi. A group of farmers found a collection of ancient writings hidden in a large jar buried in the sand. These texts are now known as the Nag Hammadi Library. They contain lost writings from early Christian and Gnostic groups. One of these texts, the Strong Sayings of Jesus, contains the following: "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This means that everything you need is already within you. If you recognize it and use it, it will lead you to a happier life. But if you ignore it or don't realize your own potential, it can lead to not so good days for you. This idea is central to Gnosticism. They believe that knowing yourself and discovering your connection with God is more important than simply following religious laws. This is very different from the structured Christianity that develops later, where churches, leaders, and rules become the focus. Additionally, in the Gospel of Thomas, there is another secret teaching of Jesus that directs our focus. In what? Deep inside. He says, "Whoever understands the meaning of these words will not taste death." Mola, what does Jesus actually mean by that? Well, first, that he wasn't talking about physical death, but about something much deeper. Most of us live our lives without making space to think about who we really are. We are afraid of our own death. We are afraid of death in general because we think it's the end. But those who understand the truth know that our life stops. When the body dies, the spirit continues, as they say, or energy is not lost and does not disappear. It only transforms. Yes. These people, they are free from fear. In that case, not tasting death means freeing ourselves from fear and realizing that we are eternal. First law of existence, you exist, and that is unchangeable. You simply change form. It's normal. One of the other ideas is that he himself reveals how reality works. Many spiritual traditions claim that. And we already know that our thoughts and beliefs shape the world around us. Modern science, especially quantum physics, proves the same thing. And in fact, it shows that reality is not as solid as matter as we think, and that consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping it. Here, not tasting death means knowing how to rise above it, by revealing or distorting the rules of the matrix in a way most people can't. No one can, they just don't allow it. No one is above anyone else in that sense, and no one can do more than another. The only real difference is in accepting and allowing certain things to be possible or impossible. Those who allow that more things are possible make it so that more things are possible. Simply put, if you cross the boundary of your own self-imposed limitation in your thinking, in what you believe, by going beyond, you realize that everything is thought and this thought is infinite. Then yes, everything is possible. In 325 AD, after the new era, the Roman Emperor Constantine gathers Christian leaders at the First Council of Nicaea to decide which books will become part of the Bible. Many texts, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Maria, the Book of Enoch, and the Gospel of Philip, were removed. Thus, the books that focus on personal awareness, hidden wisdom, and inner transformation were omitted, while those that lead to a more structured religion were preserved. These are the facts. Of course, this only strengthens the power in these words more and more, a power that changes the way we see ourselves. And that's what Jesus wanted to pass on to us. But if you think Jesus' connection to Egypt ends here, you're mistaken. There is another mysterious connection, and it comes from a secret Jewish group called the Essenes. The Essenes were a small religious community that lived near the Dead Sea, far from the cities and crowds. They were not like the other Jewish groups of that time. They focused on deep spiritual practice, strict discipline, and secret knowledge. They spent their lives in meditation, fasting, and purification through rituals. They studied ancient prophecies and believed in the coming of a divine teacher. In addition, they were known for their healing abilities and herbal medicine, something that sounds very familiar when we think of the later miracles of Jesus. Some researchers believe that Jesus may have spent time with the Essenes learning their ways. It is even possible that they encouraged him to return to Egypt to complete his training. The Essenes were heavily influenced by Egyptian mysticism, and their beliefs are closely connected to many things that Jesus later taught about inner wisdom, love, truth, and the importance of personal transformation. Strange or not, however, Egypt is not the only place where people believe that Joshua spent his lost years. Some researchers and historians suggest that he may have traveled much farther across deserts and mountains through ancient cities and temples to the distant lands of India, Tibet, and Persia. They believe that Jesus, as a young man, left his homeland in search of wisdom, studied with great teachers of the East before returning to Judea to begin his story. This idea is based on old writings, legends, and even ancient manuscripts that seem to tell a different story about the early life of Jesus. Although the Bible does not mention these journeys, several historians, travelers, and spiritual seekers claim that traces of Jesus can still be found in the teachings and records of India and Tibet. But how is that possible? Some accounts suggest Jesus may have traveled the Silk Road. This is an ancient trade route that connects the Middle East with India and China. This route wasn't just for merchants selling silk and spices. It was also used by philosophers, teachers, and monks who shared ideas and religious beliefs across different cultures. One of the most famous books suggesting that Jesus went to India is The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ by Nikolai Notovich, a Russian traveler who visited a Tibetan monastery at the end of the 19th century. Notovich claims that while he was at the Hemis monastery in Ladakh, India, he was shown an ancient manuscript that tells the story of a prophet named Isa, a name very similar to Isa, which is the Arabic and Islamic name for Jesus. Isa, with more details, traveled to India and Tibet, where he studied with Hindu and Buddhist monks, learning about their traditions and beliefs. The text describes Isa as a young man who questions the strict laws of his own people and seeks wisdom from the Brahmins and the Buddhist monks. He learns about meditation, kindness, and the idea that all people, regardless of their class or origin, deserve love and respect. This teaching is very different from the strict social rules of Jewish society at that time, where people are divided into groups based on status and religious law. Although Notovich's book has been widely criticized, other researchers later claim to have seen similar records in various monasteries, adding fuel to the theory that Jesus may have traveled east. In India, there are ancient legends about a man from the west who came to study in the temples of Varanasi, one of the holiest cities in Hinduism, and the great university of Nalanda, where Buddhist monks gathered to share their knowledge. Some researchers believe that this foreign teacher was Jesus himself, seeking deeper truths that would later shape his own teachings. The Hindu scriptures describe sages called rishis who live in the forests and meditate, seeking enlightenment. Some believe that Jesus spent time with these sages, learning the secrets of the spirit, the power of prayer, and the path to inner peace. In the same way, Tibetan Buddhist texts contain references to a saint who travels from the West and teaches people about love and compassion. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal is to attain nirvana, a state of enlightenment in which a person is free from suffering and desires. So if Yeshua really did spend some time in Tibet and India, that could explain his unique teachings. He preached love above the law, forgiveness before punishment, and inner purity before outward rituals. Ideas that are also at the core of Hindu and Buddhist traditions. For example, Jesus says in the Bible, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Well, this is very similar to Buddhist teaching. Hatred does not stop hatred with hatred, but only with love. Another example is Jesus' belief in helping the poor. The rejection of material things and living a simple life, which is very similar to the way Buddhist monks live, who own nothing but their robes and bowls and depend on kindness for their survival. But why did he come back at all, we might ask? After spending several years in the East, learning and growing as a teacher, some researchers believe that Jesus received a strong message to return to his homeland. By that time, he had gained deep knowledge and a powerful message of love, peace, and equality, which he wished to share with his own people. His time in the East, if this theory is true, it shaped his vision of a kingdom that is not of this world, spiritual, energetic. A kingdom of the heart, not a physical empire. When Jesus returns to Judea, he challenges the strict religious authorities and preaches about a new way of connecting with God, one that emphasizes faith, love, and compassion, unity instead of following strict laws and traditions. Some consider that this is the reason Jesus was seen as a threat by the religious leaders of his time. His radical ideas and foreign influences make them feel uncomfortable, threatened, which leads to his eventual arrest and crucifixion. The story of Jesus' travels to the East is fascinating, but there's an even wilder theory that suggests Jesus didn't die on the cross at all. Hello, I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you who takes the time, resources, and attention to follow everything we do every week. I want you to know that we deeply appreciate it, and it truly means a lot, both to me and to the people around me. If you wish to support us, you can do so on our updated website, enra.bg, in the donation section with PayPal, through EasyPay, with Stripe, whichever way works best for you. We truly appreciate it. Each choice in this direction is appreciated, and we thank you for all we accomplish, thanks to you too. Some believe that's not true. According to a very surprising theory, Jesus did not die on the cross but instead survived, recovered, and traveled not far all the way to India. This theory is called the swoon theory and suggests that Jesus fainted on the cross instead of dying. Later, when his followers took him down and helped him recover after he healed, he left his homeland and traveled east, where he lived for many years in India and Kashmir. At first, this theory may sound crazy. How could anyone survive crucifixion? And why would Jesus go to India of all places? Let's examine that for a moment. First, how could Jesus survive on the cross? What is possible? We all know the famous story. Jesus was arrested, sentenced to death, and nailed to a wooden cross. He was left there for hours before being taken down and placed in a cave. But here's where it gets interesting. There are several reasons why someone might believe that Jesus may not have died on the cross. First, Jesus was on the cross for only a few hours. Crucifixion was supposed to be a slow and painful way to die. Most people who were crucified suffered for 2 or 3 days before they died. According to the Bible, Jesus was on the cross for about 6 hours before being taken down. In Mark 15:25-37, it says that Jesus was crucified in the morning and died in the afternoon. This is quite unusual. For most victims, it lasted much longer. Secondly, Pilate, the Roman governor, was totally surprised that Jesus died so quickly. Pilate was surprised he was already dead. Why was he surprised? Well, because crucifixion wasn't supposed to happen that quickly. On the contrary, quite the opposite. Some historians believe that Jesus was actually still alive when he was taken down, and Pilate himself wasn't sure if Jesus had really died. Third, Jesus' legs were not broken. The Roman soldiers had a way to make sure that people on the cross were dead. They had to break his legs so he couldn't push himself up and breathe. But when the soldiers checked Jesus, they didn't break his legs. In John 19:33 it says, when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Another strange detail is what happens when a soldier pierces Jesus' side. The Bible says, instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' ribs with a spear, causing a sudden flow of blood and water. Doctors say that if blood and water flow out, it could mean that Jesus' heart was still beating. Typically, when someone dies, their blood stops flowing. But if blood comes out like that, it means he might still have been alive at that very moment. When Jesus is taken down from the cross, his body is covered with healing herbs, not with burial ones. In John 19:39-40, it says, Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes. When they took the body of Jesus, the two of them wrapped it together with the spices in strips of linen. These are not ordinary spices that are used to prepare a body for burial. Aloe and myrrh were known for their healing properties. It's good to reflect on that, about these things and connections, because things haven't always happened the way they've been told. Is it possible that the followers of Yeshua were actually trying to heal him and not just preparing him for his death? Maybe the death of Jesus didn't happen the way we've always thought. Maybe Joshua never actually died on the cross, but only appeared to make it look that way. And again, it seems that all roads lead back to India. In some old books, Jesus leaves his homeland and travels east to places like Persia, Afghanistan, and India. One of the most famous books about this theory is Christ in India. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad from Qadian, as the author writes in the book. The arguments I am about to present may seem useless to Christians, since they are not bound by what the Holy Quran and the Hadiths say on the subject. But I still mention it because I want to inform the Christians about a miracle of the Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet. I want them to know that the truths which have now been discovered after hundreds of years were already revealed by our Holy Prophet and the Holy Quran. This means that although the Bible does not mention Jesus' journey to India, other ancient texts, including Islamic scriptures and historical records, do. According to these old records, Jesus traveled to India to find the lost tribes of Israel. These are groups of Jews who were forced to leave their homeland hundreds of years ago. Many of them settled in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Kashmir. The book also says that because of this long journey, he was called the traveling prophet or even the leader of travelers. This means that Jesus was known as a great traveler, and his journey to India and Tibet was a major part of his life. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence that Jesus went to India is found in Srinagar, Kashmir. There, in the Rosabal shrine, there is an ancient tomb that some people believe belongs to Jesus himself. The tomb is called the tomb of Yuz Asaf, and it is believed that Yuz Asaf was actually Jesus. He was also a great prophet who came from the West, healed people, and preached about love and kindness. The author's book says, because hundreds of thousands of people have seen with their own eyes that the tomb of Jesus is located in Srinagar, Kashmir. Interesting. Really interesting. If that's true, then Jesus didn't ascend to heaven, but lived a long life in India, teaching people and guiding them until he died at a very old age. And of course, there are many reasons why some people believe that Jesus went to India. ancient writings from India, Tibet, and Persia tell stories about a holy man from the West who came to their land to teach the people on the origin of all things and on love. Some believe that this man may have been Jesus. These stories describe a wise teacher who speaks about kindness, peace, and truth just like Jesus. Another clue is that the teachings of Jesus sound very similar to Buddhism. Buddha teaches about compassion, inner peace, and the idea that people need to look within themselves to know the truth about themselves. Jesus also talks about these things. Then comes the mysterious tomb in Kashmir, the region of northern India. The tomb, known as Rosa Bal, looks quite different from Christian graves, but it is similar to Jewish graves. And this could have been the final resting place of Jesus, who may have lived in India for many, many years after the crucifixion. Interestingly, there's another theory. And rather, there is information that he, with his abilities, these graves was quite a high vibrational being. He made it so that only what we have heard happened at the crucifixion. In other words, he could change his appearance, change his form, and in a sense teleport. He worked with the holographic part of our universe, and he knew the principle of the hologram itself, so when he appeared to certain people, the thesis is that it wasn't really him. It's still him, but in a certain sense in a different way. By then he had already left for India. Another odd link comes from tribes in Afghanistan and Kashmir. Some people call themselves the Lost Tribes of Israel, which means they believe they are descendants of the ancient Jewish people. And Jesus once said that he came to find the lost sheep of Israel. So some people here connect this with the idea that he might have traveled to these lands to preach to those lost tribes. And it makes a lot of sense. After everything we've researched, one thing is certain. Joshua was a traveler, a man who taught people everywhere he went. So who can say that Jesus didn't travel to India during his lost years? Is there anyone like that? And if he survived the cross, he might have escaped there to continue spreading his wisdom. The fact that stories about Jesus exist in so many different cultures tells us one thing: that he is one of the most important figures in our history. So many different cultures, people, and countries want to claim him as their own to make him part of their history and beliefs. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. A teacher like Jesus, who teaches love, truth, and wisdom, would influence people everywhere. And he does. And the idea that Jesus might have lived in India is just one of many theories about what happened to him after the crucifixion. But it's far from the only one. In fact, many places around the world claim to be his final resting place, each with its own mysterious story. Some say that the final resting place of Joshua is not in Jerusalem, but in a small village in northern Japan called Shingo. Local legend says Jesus did not die on the cross. Instead, his brother Isokiri took his place while Jesus fled to Japan, where he lived a peaceful life, married a Japanese woman, had 3 daughters, and died at the age of 106. Today, his supposed grave stands in a quiet field marked with a simple wooden cross, and every year the villagers hold a festival in honor of Christ's memory. The town even calls itself Kirisuto no Sato, which means the hometown of Christ. The story goes that Jesus first traveled to Japan during his lost years, the time between the ages of 12 and 30, which the Bible does not mention. He reportedly arrived at 21. He studied under a spiritual teacher near Mount Fuji and then returned to Judea at the age of 33 to share what he had learned. After he was sentenced to death, he somehow escaped back to Japan carrying two relics, a lock of his mother Maria's hair and the severed ear of his brother Izukiri. In Japan, Jesus took the name Daitenko Taro Jorai. He learned Japanese and lived as an ordinary rice farmer in Shingo. Unlike the Jesus in the Gospels, who performs miracles and preaches to crowds, this Jesus lives a quiet life, taking care of his fields and his family. One of the strangest details of this legend is that some traditions in Shingo are very different from the rest of Japan. Once, newborn babies were wrapped in cloth embroidered with symbols resembling the Star of David. And some elders used to mark their foreheads with crosses, some marked their foreheads. There are also words in the old Shingo dialect, like Aba, which means mother, and Dada, which means father, right? Tata, which sound more like Hebrew than like Japanese. Some researchers, like the religious scholar Arimasa Kubo, believe that this could mean the people of Shingo were descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, who may have brought Jewish traditions to Japan long before the arrival of Jesus. Naturally, the legend of Jesus in Japan is one of the strangest stories ever told. The whole story comes from a set of mysterious scrolls called the Takanouchi documents, which are believed to have been discovered in 1936. These scrolls contain the last will and testament of Jesus, which are written in Japanese. But there's a problem. The original scrolls disappeared during World War II, and all that remains are modern copies. And to make things even stranger, the man who copied them, Lado Kosaka, later became famous for claiming to have direct communication with aliens on live television. And here things get even stranger. The Takenouchi documents, not sure if I'm saying that right, not only talk about Jesus, they claim to tell the entire hidden history of humanity, stretching back billions of years, which is true. However, they describe an ancient time when the world was ruled by a divine emperor, the son of the sun, and a global civilization that is believed to have started in Japan. These texts also mention pyramids, not only in Egypt, but all over the world. According to the manuscripts, these pyramids were sacred places where people communicated with celestial beings. They even say that the very word pyramid comes from the Japanese word hiramito, which means temple for the coming of the sun god. Truly impressive. Could this mean that Japan and Egypt were once connected? That ancient knowledge, including secrets that Jesus might have learned, was shared across different lands? If this sounds too wild and crazy, remember that the Takenouchi documents also say that Jesus survived the crucifixion and lived until the age of 106 in Japan. And of course, as you might expect, Shingo is not the only place that claims to hold the remains of Jesus. Everyone wants to be near him. In Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the most widely accepted site of Jesus' burial. It is believed that he was laid to rest there after the crucifixion. Nearby, the Garden Tomb is another possible site, often preferred by Protestants who say it matches the biblical descriptions better. Yes, but those are only biblical descriptions. What about the rest? With so many different stories from Japan to Jerusalem, India to Kashmir, one thing is clear. Everyone wants Joshua to be part of their own story. Every culture, every country, every group seems to have a reason to claim him as their own. But why? Maybe the real mystery isn't just where Jesus is buried, but why his story continues to inspire the whole world. And a question to ponder: is Jesus understood? And is he understood today? If your answer is yes, then how would you interpret the message we started with? Let the one who seeks not stop seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will be disturbed. And when he is disturbed, he will marvel with awe and will reign over everything. Why does everyone want to make claims about Jesus? The answer may lie in what kind of teacher he was. Joshua didn't just preach about God, he challenged the very structure of society. He uses humor, teaches women, talks about the kingdom within each person instead of a kingdom on earth, and undermines religious and political power in ways that make him a threat to those in control. Many people see Jesus as serious, but he often uses humor and irony to make his point. His stories are full of exaggerations to make people think. In Matthew 19:24, he says, "A camel can pass through a needle's eye more easily than a rich man can enter the kingdom of God." Of course, he doesn't mean a real camel, but he emphasizes how impossible it is for greedy people, arrogant people, to reach spiritual awareness. He also mocks religious leaders who pretend to be holy but are full of pride. For example, when he says, "You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel." He mocks how they focus on small rules but neglect the true meaning of faith. His humor isn't just for laughs, it's a way to break down false authority. At a time when women are expected to remain silent on religious matters, Jesus does the opposite. He teaches them openly and fearlessly. The most famous example is Maria Magdalena, who is not just his follower but someone whom Jesus deeply trusts. In fact, in the Gospel of Maria Magdalena, or Magdalena, which was later banned from the official Bible, she is described as a spiritual leader, as someone who understands Jesus better than all of his disciples. At one point in this gospel, Peter asks why Jesus would teach a woman, and Levi answers, "Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. Now I see that you argue with the woman as if she were an opponent. But if the Savior has accepted her as worthy, who are we to reject her? Surely the Savior knows her very well. That is why he loved her more than us." That brings up an important question. The Romans are afraid of him because he speaks of a kingdom greater than Caesar's. The Jewish leaders are afraid of him because he challenges their authority. He preaches a radical love that does not rely on temples, priests, or laws. It's personal but also direct and free. This is probably the reason why many of his strongest messages were removed from the Bible. We already talked about the Gospel of Thomas, but of course it is not the only one. Another forbidden gospel is the Gospel of Judas. It is an even bigger shock. In 1970, an ancient text was discovered in Egypt that tells a completely different story about Judas, or Judah. It describes him not as a traitor, but as his closest confidant. In other words, as a man who betrayed Jesus because Jesus asked him to. Why would Jesus want that, or to be handed over to the authorities? The answer is given when Jesus speaks to Judas. "You will surpass all of them, because you will sacrifice the man who clothes me, the man who dresses me." The trench coat. The body is just a costume. Let's recall the Zen Buddhist saying that goes, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." There is even evidence that early Christianity believed in reincarnation, but later this idea was removed. One of the biggest clues comes from Origen. He was an early Christian theologian. He wrote that souls existed before birth and can return to life again, learning from past mistakes. In 553 AD, the Church officially declared reincarnation a heresy, which meant it was no longer allowed to be preached. And if we think about why, the logic becomes clear. Imagine if people back then had known that they have infinite lives as probabilities in the quantum field, or in the mind, would they have been so afraid of Judgment Day, hell, and consequently be threatened with Satan? Consequently, the church wouldn't have had so much control over them. In other words, the idea of one life, one judgment, and eternal punishment is a way to keep people obedient. All of this brings us back to the question of why every culture wants Jesus to belong to them. Well, isn't he more than just a religious teacher? He's a rebel, thinker, philosopher, leader of human transformation. His message about inner truth, self-discovery, and love for all people is so powerful that every nation wishes to have such a person in its history. He is not just for one group, he belongs to everyone. But what if there is something even more mysterious about him? Some believe that Jesus was not just a spiritual leader, but a being with a more expansive level of consciousness. A person who has reached an advanced state of consciousness and energy. Even Bashar, a being channeled by Dario Anka, speaks about Jesus in a way that challenges everything we think we know. But before we dive into that, let's briefly explain who Bashar is for those who don't know. Bashar is an extraterrestrial consciousness from the highly advanced civilization Esasani, providing information and knowledge to planet Earth, to humanity on behalf of and through a man named Dario Anka. For more than 30 years now, Bashar has been sharing knowledge about the universe, energy, and potential. His messages focus on the idea that our beliefs create our reality. According to Bashar, Jesus is not just a teacher, but a being of exceptionally high vibration, someone whose existence shines like a light. One of the most fascinating things that Bashar says is that if we were to travel back in time now, ancient people would see us as a great light. We would shine very brightly. Why? Because our energy today is at a much higher frequency than that of people thousands of years ago. If we step into the past, ancient people might see us as beings of light, almost like angels. Now think about the stories of Jesus. In the Bible, there are moments when Jesus is described as shining with a bright, unearthly light. One of the most famous examples is called the Transfiguration, change of appearance. In Matt 17:2 it says, "His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light." We all shine. The question is to learn how to show it. It wasn't because of magic or a divine event, but because its frequency is so high that its energy has become visible. And if we think about it, Jesus isn't the only one in the Bible associated with light. There are many stories about angels appearing as bright, glowing figures. Bashar says that these angels were not what we think they were. More specifically, most angels described as beings of light coming from the sky and the stars in religious doctrines are actually highly advanced and extraterrestrial beings from other civilizations. Yeah, that raises an excellent question. Was Jesus visited by these beings? For the curious, Operation TROJAN Horse. The Bible is full of strange encounters with glowing beings and mysterious elements. at the forest rangers of Inuka. Moses, who sees the burning bush, how real is he actually? Bashar says this is a holographic energy projection, which wasn't understood then. That's how he describes it. The burning bush was a holographic projection of energy, which was interpreted as fire. Similar to the way people today see balls of light, like in the sky, unidentified flying objects. In other words, Moses saw an energy field, something that looks like fire because people at that time had no other way to describe or define it. And what about the bright light on Mount Sinai? According to Bashar, this was actually a landing of a ship, filling the sky with energy. Could this mean that some of the most important moments in religious history were actually encounters with advanced beings? Maybe that's also part of the reason for healing the sick, multiplying food, and even calming storms. Maybe that's the reason he didn't perform miracles in the way we traditionally think. It would be good, folks, to allow ourselves the version in our minds that instead of all that, he understood energy. He understood the principles of the universe and existence, with part of this knowledge being given to him by these advanced beings. That would explain a lot. Why his message is so revolutionary. He doesn't just repeat old teachings, he also brings new knowledge. Something that doesn't fit into the world as people have known it. Maybe that's why it was so dangerous for the authorities of his time. He doesn't just talk about being kind and loving. He teaches how to free ourselves from the control of religious and political systems. His teachings are so powerful, so ahead of their time, that in my opinion, even today they are still quite misunderstood. Maybe he is one of the first people who really explains and shows the structure of reality. Whether because he discovered the hidden mysteries in Egypt, studied in distant lands, or even communicated with higher beings, one thing is certain, that the people of his time were not ready for him. His teachings challenge all they believe, not just about faith, but about reality itself. Maybe that's why we've been taught to fear his return. Maybe that's why the idea of the second coming of Jesus is portrayed as an apocalyptic event marked by fire, destruction, and judgment. Maybe they wanted to make sure we wouldn't want him back. But what if his return isn't about chaos and punishment? Imagine trying to explain a smartphone to someone living in a cave thousands of years ago. How would you do it? Well, you could show them the screen, the apps, how you can talk to people on the other side of the planet, but they wouldn't be able to understand. They might even be afraid of the phone, thinking it's some kind of black magic or a trick, some great evil. Well, what if that's what Jesus was showing, just like the example with the smartphone? What if he was teaching things that were so advanced, so different from what people believed at that time, that they just couldn't understand him? Bashara explains that Joshua never tried to create followers. Instead, he was trying to show people that they are just like him. Of course, each of us has the full right to make our own interpretations of everything that has been said, not only from Jesus, but from all religious texts as well. Each one of us has the complete freedom to express ourselves in the way we think is best, and the purpose of this show is by no means to convince you of something or to sway you toward a particular teaching, knowledge, or thesis. In no way do I want you to perceive these ideas as something mandatory or as some kind of imposed law. But it's nice, at least to give it some thought. In Latin, ligare means to bind or connect, and religare with the prefix re means to reconnect, to restore the connection. If we accept this etymology for the word religion, then it can be understood as the restoration of the connection. Whether it's with God, the source, the universe, the higher mind, the absolute, whatever you call it. In this sense, this word can be interpreted as rediscovering the true essence, which is at the core of many spiritual paths, from Buddhism to Christian mysticism. If a person has forgotten who they are on a deep level, then religare is the act of connecting with their true essence, a return to oneself. While the historical interpretation of religare means to reconnect, in a deeper spiritual context, it can be seen as a return to oneself. But this return is the path to inner awareness, unity, and awakening. Isn't this also about the same thing? Religare, a return to oneself, a return to the already familiar self and what we ourselves have deeply forgotten, so that we can get to know it in a new way. Once we know it, we'll be disturbed. We will be amazed with admiration, and we will reign over what is familiar to us. Why? Well, because I know it. This plan and the words that Jesus shared in the form of I am the way, the idea is suit yourself. Be like me, be this way. I am the example for you, I am the way in its entirety. Be like me, I'm not better than you. Be like me, walk with me. I am the way, here, look at me. I am doing it, I already exist and live this way. Here it is, as an option for you, as an option. Look at me and you will see the way itself. I am the way itself. This is real awareness. That each one of us is on the path itself. Each one of us is the path itself. Each of us is the path. Each one of us contains a particle that is this path, and the truth and the life as is well known. Some of these, as they are called, slightly embellished interpretations, left misunderstood over time or deliberately suppressed. Actually, it doesn't matter at all. Because knowledge is always available to those who seek and do not stop in their search. This means that Joshua did not come to tell people to kneel before him. He comes to show them what they are capable of. He wants them to wake up about their own strength and connection, their own source. Of course, most people won't be ready to hear this. It's much easier to turn Jesus into something unattainable, something that's too holy to be touched or reached. That's why over time his message has been changed. Instead of teaching that all people can be like Yeshua, the religious leaders have taught that he is the only one who can be like that. And so, if people weren't ready for Jesus back then, what can we say about now? Many believe that the second coming means that Jesus will return in the future, but Bashar has another explanation. The second coming is the awakening within each of you of your own Christ consciousness. What does that mean? It means that Jesus does not need to return in physical form because his mission, his spirit, his wisdom, his energy already flows and is within everyone. He has done what he should, when he should, how he should, as much as he should. The second coming happens when enough people reach a more expanded state of consciousness, when they finally understand what Jesus was really teaching. Think about the world today. More and more people are talking about energy, vibrations, spiritual awakening, frequency, self-discovery. Science is beginning to prove the connections between thought and emotions, showing that they shape reality, something that Jesus teaches. When he says, "This is your faith," It was your faith that made the difference. That is your choice, your focus point. It changes reality. Bashar points out an interesting moment from the Bible that many people overlook. When Jesus returns to his hometown, he can't perform miracles because the people there didn't believe in him. They still saw him simply as the carpenter's son, not as the great teacher. This means that Jesus' power doesn't come only from him, but also from the energy of the people around him. If people weren't open to his message, didn't accept him, didn't allow him in, didn't choose to believe in his teaching, his abilities didn't work. That's what Bashara teaches now. Reality reflects what you believe in. Whatever you emit, that's what you'll get back in response. Those who live in fear will experience fear, and those who embrace love and connection will find that their world is shaped by them. Maybe Jesus isn't just performing miracles. Maybe he is revealing what is possible when someone chooses to walk the path to their true potential, beyond the boundaries of their own limitation. His actions should not be viewed, in my opinion, as supernatural events beyond human reach. Instead, they are examples of how reality is plastic for those who understand its true nature. He demonstrates that faith, consciousness, and love have the power to transform the world. If Jesus was ahead of his time, then it makes sense, so to speak, for him to return when the world is finally ready. Not as someone descending from the sky, but as a change in consciousness, a moment when enough people vibrate at a higher frequency, so they can finally understand what he meant. And actually, this is already happening. More and more people are questioning old beliefs and dogmas, and they know there's something more. There is something beyond what they've been taught. They are searching for deeper truths, asking questions, and realizing that spirituality isn't about fear or control, but about personal awakening, understanding, acceptance, unfolding. Jesus said, if your teachers tell you, look, the kingdom is in heaven, then the birds of the sky will be above you. If they tell you it is in the sea, then the fish will be above you. But the kingdom is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, you will be known, and you will realize that you are the children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, you will dwell in poverty and you will be alone. You will be poverty. Shartavam, when you get to know yourself, when you explore the unknown and set out on the path of exploration by yourself, that is, on the path of ignorance, of the unknown, of the infinite. And when Jesus says, you are the light of the world, he meant you more than 2,000 years ago. He was speaking to you as well. He shows that you too can be light and free like him. His equal and not his follower. Apak, for those who truly have ears to hear, these words still echo through time. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth in this sense wasn't meant to be hidden, but for centuries she was consumed by fear, rewritten by force, and buried under time. The truth has a way to survive. Just like light can never be completely extinguished. And so, whether through his return or through our own awakening, Jesus remains not as a distant figure from history, not as a prophecy that is yet to be revealed, but as something much greater, as a mind from eternity, because the whole is mind. The world is mental, like a light that has never faded, waiting for the world at last to remember itself. Thank you, bowing. Thank you for watching and listening to the entire show. A long, endless topic, but one that deserves attention, in my opinion. Now, after hearing this story, for those of you who still hadn't allowed this information to reach you, are you ready to open yourselves up? Are you ready to consider that the world has many more layers than you ever imagined? Are you ready to open yourselves up to knowledge and information that you never even imagined existed before? Are you ready to discover yourself? Challenge yourself and think about all of this. Provoke yourself to step outside the framework of the beliefs and convictions you have created for yourself. Whatever they are, always. There is always more beyond. Everything continues into infinity. Everything is thought and everything is information and everything is real. It depends on your choice now. Feel the power that is within you. Embrace it and her. Accept. She's always been there, people. We are the ones who make ourselves forget it, and we convince ourselves of our own lies and delusions. Let this episode be a reminder that anyone can, and anything is possible.